Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. This week we've got Paul Markham on the podcast. He's a broadcast media architect, and I understand you've just been working on the Olympics. Is that right, Paul?
Yeah. So I work for Discovery and kind of Eurosport's part of the portfolio, and as part of the global media architecture I've been working on, it's been full tilt for the Tokyo Olympics, and we've got the Beijing Olympics, the Winter Olympics coming up quite soon as well, because they're just at the turn of next year. So a lot of work going on.
Wow, that sounds exciting. And so I guess it's all sort of where the world is going in broadcast, and we always have this sort of conversation, traditional engineering versus this sort of commodity IT and cloud offerings that are happening these days. What's your take on it? Are we headed in the right direction, Paul?
Well, I think I think whether right or wrong is probably not the issue, as it were, because it's kind of a matter of opinion and who you are, whether it's right or wrong. But I think whether it's right or wrong or not, it's happening. And so what we're seeing is, because of the impact of IP and because of a lot of things moving to IP networks, we really have to start engaging with that mindset and start understanding what that means in a sort of wide-ranging context. And I think traditionally the broadcast industry, maybe for the last 20, 30 years, has had this sort of artificial wall. Well, it wasn't artificial at the start, was it? It was a wall. There was IT over there, and then there was a bit of broadcast kit over there. And to start with, they were completely separate things, weren't they?
Never the twain shall meet, right?
Never the twain shall meet. IT kit, was in that rack, and broadcast kit was in that rack, and why would they meet? Because they were different things. I think we've been on a journey over the last 20 years or so where actually they've slowly moved together, haven't they? And they've slowly started getting wired into each other's racks, and I think we're at the point now where we're starting to say, well, now we're plugging Ethernet cables into broadcast kit, and now we're deploying firmware updates onto broadcast kit, and soon we're going to be deploying appliances into public cloud. In fact, to some extent we're doing that already, but I think we're going to be seeing more of that. And so suddenly, we've changed from a traditional kind of baseband connectivity network to an Ethernet IP based network, and we've also changed from hardware embedded devices to software deployments. And these changes are still evolving; they're still going on. But that's the clear direction of travel, isn't it?
Yeah. And do you think when cloud first started coming on the scene that it really forced the hand and sort of made it happen, or was that the general direction of travel?
I think it's the direction of travel anyway. I guess when cloud first came on the scene, I think a lot of us in the broadcast industry just went, well, that's never going to be relevant to us.
Yes. Yes, indeed.
And obviously we were wrong about that. I think it's increasingly relevant, isn't it? And at the moment, it's there's certain bits of your stack that you want to put in the cloud. I think in the future, those things that we sort of suck our teeth at and say, "Oh, that'll never go in the cloud," they'll go in the cloud too. I think that's clearly where we're headed, and our cloud providers now see us, the broadcast industry, as a potentially very lucrative seam of kit. We've got a lot of kit, right? We've got a lot of stuff in data centers, and they look at that and they say, well, we can make some money there, but also we can help you get some scale and save some money. I mean, they're not going to make money unless they offer a proposition that we want. We're going to be lucid about it.
Yeah.
So and they're super keen, and when you see the pace at which Amazon and Google and even Microsoft are iterating their products to kind of go into every market, not just us, but really targeting us specifically alongside others, that those platforms are iterating so fast, and they're doing things much faster than we might have anticipated. So yeah, multicast is something that we know that they're looking at, and that they're starting to say to us, well, this is something that we might be doing soon.
Yeah. But I mean, it so rings true what you just said about, we'll put a bit up there because what we've got is precious, the content's precious. But all right, we'll put one workload in the cloud, we'll put another one. And is it about gaining that trust and setting the benchmarks? And if it meets the benchmarks, then it's good to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think as you start to go in that direction, you get to a point maybe where you think, oh, well, actually having stuff that's not in the cloud is more inconvenient. You kind of end up wanting it all there because you've got one set of tools and one set of management stack, and you can throw everything at it, and you don't have to rely on if you want another VM, another instance, another whatever it is, internally you'll have a team that has got a limited amount of capacity. It doesn't matter how great they are. We've got some fantastic teams, but look, there's only going to be so many people. And if you want another VM from AWS or from Google, you're always going to get it. It's always going to be, you're always going to get what you're asking them for. And you're going to get it in seconds or at least minutes, not weeks or months. So I think that there's always a lot of talk about the cost benefit of the cloud, but that is maybe a slightly less tangible benefit, is that ability to do things quickly.
And just on the cost then, so I just talked about broadcast letting go and moving things into the cloud. But there's a lot of broadcasters or broadcast companies, service providers that have private cloud, right? Mm-hmm. And what is the difference? Is the big driver the cost, private versus public?
I think it's a conceptual difference, isn't it? Because although you can, with a private cloud, you might be able to deploy some of the same tools and some of the same some of the same methodologies, as it were, but what you don't get with private cloud is that you don't get unlimited scaling, because to all intents and purposes, public cloud gives you unlimited scaling. And that means up and down. And then that kind of leads on to the next, that ties into the next thing I'm going to say, which is you've got to change your mindset, because it's about this dynamic usage of capacity and not just about having a fixed unit of capacity. So, if you've got a rack full of VMs, you've got a rack full of VMs on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, all the way through till Sunday, and on Christmas Day, and on every day, right? But if you deploy your cloud environment intelligently, you can have capacity only when you need it, and that gives you that huge benefit that you can save a huge amount of money by not having things lying around doing nothing. I think one of the things that I found when I worked in access services, where we maybe been on this journey a few years ago, because we weren't dealing with lots of video files. We were dealing not lots of high definition video files. We were dealing with relatively low bandwidth stuff, which made it a lot easier at the time. I think the journey we went on was we realized that we had, for resilience, for broadcast resilience, we had a backup, and we had a DR, and we had a DR, we had a backup, and so we had maybe 4 or 5 layers of hardware to do one job, and not only that, but you had to provision that every one of those layers for your peak capacity, right? For the time that you had the most people doing the most things, and you needed the most compute power. And then, when we looked at it, you could make all of it. You could make a lot of it a serverless workflow in a public cloud environment, and you could literally only pay for it when you needed it, and you could only pay for it, only pay for 1 and not 5, and you still get the resilience, and you still get all the capacity you need. So I think that part of that journey, I think, is looking at that mindset and not just thinking about, well, I need a VM to run this. It's got to be such and such a VM. We've got to allow this much capacity. Well, how do you architect your platform so that you can scale? And that might mean breaking your application down into smaller bits and pieces, and it might mean just rethinking how you move data around so that you can take advantage of these things. And these things aren't they're not a short-term thing. You don't just wave a magic wand and do all of this. I think this is going to be a journey of years to go through this and to start leveraging these opportunities to actually massively reduce cost. But everyone's been there. That if you just pick up your data center and stick it in public cloud and pay by the hour for the same amount of compute and storage, you're not going to save money. You're going to spend money.
But
more money. That's absolutely a fact.
Yeah, and actually, you just mentioned there, it could take a couple of years to develop these sort of architectures and so on. What about the skills? How has the industry had to reskill or bring in additional skills? How has that landscape changed?
I think it's been quite challenging because I think the broadcast discipline, if you like, the broadcast engineering discipline has relied very much on drawing steadily more and more on the IT expertise in every organization. And that's been challenging from all sorts of perspectives because this big wall I mentioned between broadcast and IT, it's not just an engineering wall. It goes right up the organization sometimes, doesn't it? It goes right up to the budgets and to the management and to everything that comes down from there. And so IT networks in a traditional organization, they're an overhead. They're for office. They're for providing office connectivity. So when you start to draw on those skills from those teams for your broadcast stack, those teams aren't necessarily always resourced for that. And secondarily, that they may be staffed with absolutely brilliant network engineers who don't come from a broadcast background, and so really need to kind of get their head around the stuff that you need to know for broadcast. Like, I guess in a traditional IT environment, you might think, oh, well, we'll do an upgrade this weekend. We'll turn everything off on Saturday afternoon. Obviously, when you're doing live sports, that's the worst time, right?
Yeah.
So I think just lots of little intricate details like that. I think traditional IT skill sets struggle with, and then you've got the overlay of this whole kind of business culture, which is still probably thinks of IT to some extent as an office enabler and not necessarily a broadcast tech enabler. So yes, I think skills are challenging in both directions there, aren't they?
Yeah, both directions.
And I think one of the things that we can learn from the cloud providers is we can start to look at the idea of these sort of multidisciplinary teams. And so I think this is something that I'm quite keen on, which is to say, you might have a team of network engineers, a team of playout engineers. Don't do that. Just try and think about your end product and what it takes to deliver that, and put a team of people together with different skills who can work together to deliver the thing. And I guess that's really challenging sometimes in our world, because some of the things that we have to deliver are so big. How can you get one team to do that? And you have to try and make a decision somewhere.
Yeah.
I guess what Jeff Bezos, whether you like him or loathe him, what he did do in Amazon was try and carve out these teams that work to a sort of API and deliver have a sort of service contract. So that's I think it's interesting because obviously, as I say, like them or loathe them, they've been incredibly successful at what they do.
Yeah. And what about like service management, for example? So, broadcast is a real-time sort of thing. The SLA levels are like completely up there, and it's probably at odds still with like the IT world.
Yeah, I think the IT world has a long way to go in terms of adapting to those concepts. That's true. I think we need to, but I think what we need to do from both sides is recognise that that has to happen. We can't simply sit on the broadcast side and say, oh well, all that IT stuff, it's not relevant to us because, and at the same time that's true the other way as well. I think, you know, you can't, IT people can't sit around saying, oh well, we don't care about that. So I think it's very much looking at best of breed.
Yeah, and even like, you know, incident management and those sort of things. And so
I mean, I think, you know, when you look at something like change management, for example, I think you've got to be open-minded and say, well, actually, maybe you need to have a change board every day, or however often it needs to be, and try and challenge that mindset of, oh, it's got to be weekly.
And what about the user's experience, you know, with all these new sort of tools in the cloud? That must have really sort of opened up what used to be a black box, right?
Yeah, I think, again, I think, you know, this is one of those mindset shifts, isn't it? That if you buy a black box from a tech provider and you stick it in a rack, it's going to be there for 5, maybe more, maybe 10 years, maybe longer than that. And so you kind of get used to this idea of what that can do and what that thing's going to do and what that type of thing does. And so you sort of get used to plugging those together and you've got a stack. I think when you get into that sort of very much more abstract kind of software defined world of, you know, appliances in you know, ephemeral cloud instances that talk over IP, they could be there 1 minute and gone the next. I think you do then have to start thinking about not what's possible, but what you really need, and what the end user, I guess the end user is ultimately the viewer or the advertiser, maybe if you're a broadcaster. But then, you know, going back from that, the teams who are delivering that final broadcast experience, so the operational teams, the producers, the talent, all of those people who you're working with, what do they need? How do you prioritize? And certainly when you start getting into developing software, which I think most organizations now have, how do you prioritize those features and those things that those people need? And I think the only way you can sensibly do it is by talking to them. I know that sounds obvious, but I think, you know, again, from an engineering discipline, I think there's very much a tendency to think that you've got all the answers, and actually, I think, you know, we need to talk to the people who are going to use our stuff to understand what they really need from it, and that might lead us to actually make some quite clever calls in terms of what isn't necessary.
Yeah, because I mean, most things are like web apps these days, and so accessible for either viewers or, like, you know, operational teams, etc., etc. That's you know, we've come so far actually in the last sort of, you know, 15-20 years, as you said. So Paul, I'd just like to say thank you actually for coming on the show. It's been it's one of my favorite topics actually, so I'd just like to say thank you.
I could talk all evening about it, Ben, to be quite honest. I think it's, you know, it's a pleasure. It's
no worries. Absolutely no worries. If you want to find Paul Markham on LinkedIn, just head over to LinkedIn, and I'm sure he'll be happy to connect with you on there. So thanks again, Paul, and talk to you soon. Yeah.
Talk to you soon. Thanks, Ben.